Hey, what's going on, everybody? Want to welcome you all to another episode of the Counterparts Podcast. Today we have a pretty good episode coming up. I'm Everett Stevenson, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by my other co-host. You guys can say your names.
Hey everybody, I'm one of the co-hosts. I'm Samantha Adams.
Hi everybody, my name is Malik Foster, co-host for the Counterparts Podcast.
Hey everyone, I am Shantae Tidwell. I'm new to the party.
Okay, guys, we have a lovely topic for you guys today. We're going to be discussing this week how redlining is encouraging the segregation of school systems here in the United States. I think everybody kind of knows what redlining is, but we can kind of get in more detail about that. We're going to discuss that a little bit into the separate but equal stuff. Also, the effects that it has on the school districts, taxes, as well as some things that happened with Kamala Harris, her prosecuting some people out in California. So that's our lineup today. Sam, you want to get us into redlining?
Sure. So redlining, it's a discriminatory practice, right? And it what it does is it creates the borderlines in different districts and neighborhoods. And the reason why that's important is because where those lines and borders and stuff like that are located within different communities has an effect on a multitude of things. And a lot of times when you hear about redlining, you hear about it as it relates to voting, right? How many representatives a district can have and things like that. But although we all know, well, most of us know that, because some people don't know, that it also has its effect on taxes, right? Things like property taxes and property taxes, that money is often distributed to schools, right? And so when you're talking about redlining and its effect on taxes and things like that, you also look at who's paying into those taxes. If you are creating areas where there's not a lot of property ownership from the people that live in that community, people are not going to be pouring into that community, meaning that schools are not going to really be funded as much as other places. They're not going to have greater resources, things like that. So, when we're talking about redlining today, we're talking about it more so as it relates to education and how its effect on education. And the reason why we said that we're going to talk about its effect on segregation. Now, we know schools are desegregated, right? But, we also know the fact that, we typically have communities of people living in certain areas. And when I say communities of people, it doesn't mean just, everybody is a unit, everybody is unified. It's just, you might have a lot of Black people living in a particular neighborhood. You might have a lot of Hispanic people living in a particular neighborhood. Like you go to most cities, you'll have things like a Chinatown. If you go to New York is probably one of the greatest examples of what I'm talking about, right? Because in New York, you have things like Little Italy, right? If you go to Miami, you have Little Havana. You have these different areas where the concentration of people is a particular demographic. And so when you're talking about redlining, especially its effect on Black people, Black and brown people, but mostly Black people, the schools in those areas that are predominantly Black don't get as much funding because it lacks in property ownership, because there's not as much taxes being paid. They changed the redlining causes them to not have as many representatives, so you don't have as many people speaking up, or if you do, they may not necessarily get the votes that they need, things like that. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background there. Everett, you're on mute.
I want to jump in there too and say how I believe that one of the direct effects from that too is like continuation of the fact that there is a lower taxable incomes, I guess, for the schools, is that can show like you might see certain schools, they might not have a band or something like that, or they may not have certain transportation modes available for their student athletes. Sometimes some students may have to pay to participate in sports And it goes on not only just from the enrichment factors, but you also have questions that when you look at resources, some of the books, some of the school books might not be as up to date. Maybe some of the computers in the library might not necessarily be as fast or equipped. Maybe each room might not have, access to computers and high-speed internet, things of that nature, or probably laptops for each student and stuff. Um, Other resources that maybe other students in the same U.S. Public school district may receive at different schools that might not be available to certain individuals who may be in high rental areas and concentrations. And we know this is something that's also big because if you look at how things have been going um, all over the nation, like, recently we've seen that there's always been like this, in order to even rent nowadays, it needs to be like maybe a 4 times income to show that you can afford to rent a unit. And most recently, I thought I saw something that said in New York they were looking for almost 40 times, the rental income in order for residents to qualify for the ability to rent a property, not even purchase that property. So this is something that we can definitely see as a trend that could continue on and go further and further. And even take the conversation away from not only just being an owner and having those tax dollars to not even being able to stay in certain neighborhoods that, do have high ownership because of the fact that, they might price point people out for other purposes such as rents. So I just want to throw those things in there and tie in how those tax dollars also affect the schools directly.
Yeah, and also another big component of this that it doesn't really relate to the schools, but I just wanted to mention it briefly, is the mortgages, right? Home ownership, right? That's a big thing because that determines certain things as well. In types of neighborhoods, that's how people determine some neighborhoods, classification of neighborhoods due to the home ownership, the property values. That's very important as well. And redlining, when you're denying people mortgages, that has an impact on people as well in terms of getting home ownership, building that generational wealth. So keeping people down, that's a very big component because if you're starting from the bottom and then your family can't build any wealth, and then the next generation starting at the bottom, the cycle continues, right? So I know Bank of America recently, they did the zero money down for the housing. That's just I think it's a start. It's not perfect, but that's just an example to show like, they know what's going on, and it's targeting Black and Hispanics, by the way, Black people and Hispanics. I don't know the exact criteria. I haven't looked into it. It just kind of came out, but that's just something to try to correct some of the issues. But honestly, we need legislation on this. Redlining is a very discriminatory practices, predominantly targeting Black people, but it targets other people as well. But it's been used for Black people the longest, the first and the longest. So that's just another argument for the reason why we need Black people here in the United States to send some
Hey, Malik, real quick on what you just said, I just wanted to touch base on that too, because I think it's interesting to make sure that, this isn't one of those situations where it's kind of like that trick bag again, right? Where you may have individuals where they say, hey, we're providing zero down payment in these areas, but it may not be specifically for these individuals, right? Like, so, one of the things that I saw was something stating that, precisely that these were, if you will, like empowerment zones that they were looking to try to, help bring up home ownership in, which were predominantly, Black or brown communities. I also wanted to make sure that hopefully, not make sure, but I also want to hope to see that those are the same citizens that are going to be able to get access to that type of funding, and not investors who are looking to just, and I don't want to say investors, it should be an individual home buyer, but people who are looking to capitalize on a property, get it, and then, I'm not telling nobody what to do with their own home, but it doesn't go to the people in the communities that can be serviced best is all I want to say. It may be coming to people who may be looking to just invest in that community solely for this program and not, really be a part of that community and not really be, in love with the community, not really one that's going to be there, that's trying to build it up, that's going to take pride in it and things of that nature. So I just want to throw that on there.
Well, I was going to say, and then I'll let if Shantae has something to say about it. I was going to say that it's a good segue into our next little subtopic, separate but unequal, because this case, it's a separate policy specific for Black and Hispanics, but is it really equal? Because like, okay, there's zero money down, but that's it. Everything else is the same. And, they're trying to tie people up into longer mortgages. They're talking about even more than 30 years, like 50-year mortgages, even longer in the upcoming future. So it's like, it's really kind of a trip bag because okay, you don't have to have any money down, but you're still tied up. The interest rate will still be the same, even though, okay, the criteria to qualify might be a lower barrier entry, but they're trying to sell these homes because they're seeing that a lot of millennials and stuff are trying to, rent more, right? And not trying to purchase. So that's another trend that's going along. So I think they're just trying to, find a ways to get more clients, Bank of America specifically, and also trying to help, but not really. So that's where the trick bag comes in. Like, it looks like you're trying to help, but you're not really providing assistance, like a specific benefit that wasn't already available to other groups. Like, other groups like predominantly white people could still get zero money down. So it's not like it wasn't available. So that's what I wanted to say. Go ahead, Shantae.
Yeah, so the Bank of America criteria is also looks at having they don't look at your credit score at all. So there's something for something there. I understand both sides of this, doing bankruptcy, being involved in bankruptcy and doing bankruptcy law. I understand both sides, on the debtor side as well as the creditor side. So the creditor is giving you the opportunity to the opportunity of home ownership, right? But at the same time, they have to, like, they're giving you no credit score. So what are we going to look at? We're going to look at your rental history, how you pay your landlord or your property manager. And if I'm not looking at your credit score, I am taking a risk, regardless, as a creditor, of offering you that loan. So I have to balance it out somewhere. And a way they balance it out could be to elongate that mortgage. Now, I got to be honest with you, I don't know with certainty that Bank of America is stating that they're going to go longer than 30 years. But that is probable. But if they did, I would understand why. It doesn't negate the fact that it still populates that community with people that look like us, regardless of what those the eligibility qualities characteristics are. It still populates those communities with people that look like us. So though that in and of itself is another beast, but the fact that we have Black people in predominantly white neighborhoods now, what does that mean? And that's where we kind of segue back into that redlining idea. Home ownership. Redlining is strongly based on home ownership. And I look at, like, I went to Tennessee State University. I look at Nashville and that area when I was there in 2000 versus 2022, and it looks fundamentally different because of gentrification. It looks fundamentally different. So taxpayers' monies are going to be pulled from those areas and fund these school systems. And I'm going to pause there because I got some integral what I call tidbits and nuggets as it relates to my area where I live right now, because redlining as it relates to the school district is a hot topic here in Memphis and Shelby County. It's a very hot topic. So I'm going to pause there and defer the floor, but I'm going to pick up where I left off.
Okay. Well, that's good. One of the things I did want to say something about is about the elongation of that loan. It sounds to me that what they're also doing is they're adding the money you would pay in down payment costs to the back end of the loan. And rather than saying it's no money down, yeah, it's no money down, but you're still paying it. And so I think that in part might be the trick bag, as Malik loves to use, you know? And so the thing about that thing is a lot of people are very skeptical about it, right? Especially Black folks, because we're always skeptical about everything, especially when you dangling money in front of us like that. It's like, that's how we got over here in the first place. How did we get on that boat? You know what I'm saying? Did you say it was a cruise? We know it's not. I'm joking, but you know, we're definitely skeptical because we've been burnt so many times about any time where somebody's trying to quote unquote right or wrong, right? And so I just wanted to make sure I throw this in here. When you're talking about discrimination, right? People can try to make the argument that those type of home loans are discriminatory because they are catered to Black and brown people. But the way that discrimination works in this country is it's not considered discrimination when its purpose is to right a wrong, right? So I just wanted to make sure I throw that out there. That's like the really high level version. It goes a lot deeper. There's case law, blah, 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 but we're not going to get into all of that today. But just know that if you're writing such as discriminatory practices over the course of however many years, even if you look at what happened to the real estate market back in 2008 and how it crashed because it was giving out discriminatory loans to a lot of Black folks. And Bank of America was definitely, well, Countrywide was one of them, and Bank of America bought Countrywide.
Fargo too. They in hot water. No, I said Wells Fargo was in hot water as well.
Yeah, Wells Fargo is always in hot water because
also
they are consistently exercising discriminatory
like the
practices.
reason why I say trip bag is okay, no money down, right, for down payment, but you got to pay your your homeowner's insurance and property taxes upfront at closing. Like
you typically have to do that anyway. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's regardless. So no, so that's where it's not different. So that part, it's not different whether you do it this way or the traditional, for lack of a better word.
If you say no money, that's what people are thinking. Like, okay, I get the house, and then
no, it's spelled out no down payment.
Right, the down payment. Let's break this down for a second.
Because
right?
it's saying no closing costs.
Oh, hold on, I got you. Let me break this down because
get it caught up in terminology.
View our podcast that don't own a home, so they don't know the process, right? Whenever you go to purchase a home, you have to put a deposit down. That deposit is also referred to as earnest money. That is a certain percentage of the total of the house, right? That they're selling it for. You put that money down. That is the amount of money, excuse me, that the bank is saying you don't have to do that, right? Now, there are still costs that are required in order to close on the property. There are closing costs, but the closing costs include things like the attorney fee, the appraisal. The appraisal, things like that. Right. But costs that are required at closing still include, because the bank is going to fund the loan, right? And so when the bank funds the loan for the buyer, money that still has to be paid are going to be the property taxes. Even if the property taxes had already been paid by the previous owner, they will pay an estimated amount. And then like if it's more than, if the next year's taxes that come out are more than what the person paid, they pay the difference when they get their tax bill. If it's less than, that money gets rolled, the additional money, the extra money gets rolled over to the next year. It's very rare that they'll cut a check, right? So taxes are definitely one of them because this is still America and we have to pay taxes, like, you know, and so things like that. If there's a homeowners association, like let's say the house is inside of a subdivision, or even if it's a condo and there's a condo association, there are fees that are associated with that. Those things have to get paid, right? If there is a lien on the property, the lien has to get paid. Certain things have to get paid regardless, right? And those are normal things that happen at a real estate closing. But there are,
like I mentioned, your seller's fees and, you know what I mean, the buyer's fees as well, like for the different agents and stuff like that. Exactly. You mentioned a lot, you know what I'm saying? Title information and things,
Yeah, all that stuff has to get paid regardless. So it's not like you just walking in there to the closing and not having to come out your pocket no money. You still got to come out your pocket some money. Typically, that money down would go towards the overall cost of the property purchase of the property. And so, like if you have buy a house 400,000, right, and you put 10,000 down, the bank is funding the 90,000. But that full 100,000 is going to go to the closing costs, the taxes, and all of that, the fees, everything like that is going to go to all that, including whatever you work out with the seller, right? Because sometimes there are things that you need to work out with the seller, like, okay, I want that fan that's up in the house. Oh,
Yep.
I want to make sure that you guys install the pool in the back, or fix the pool in the back, or put a new roof on, and things like that. Sometimes, the seller also has to contribute, and that stuff will come out of the value of the property, or the equity in the property, because the equity in the property is how much money is left in that home when they sell it, and they typically take that out. So that's how that works. So when you're talking about property ownership and you're talking about the amount of money that goes into the taxes, right? Because we're still talking about redlining. It's not how to buy a house 101. When you're talking about redlining, the value, we've done a podcast, and we want you guys to go check it out, about how when Black people go to sell their home, this doesn't happen everywhere and all the time, but there has been times where they have found where the appraisal amount, which is the value of the house, has been devalued, so that the seller, the Black family or Black person that's selling that house, is being told that the value of the house is less than what it actually is. So when they go to sell the house, they're selling the house and there's still equity in the home. And if they end up selling it to a white person or white family who may not be participating in this discriminatory practice, they may be completely oblivious. Let's say in 3-4 years, that white family goes to refinance the house. They get that extra equity that in fact belonged to that Black family. So, it creates all of these different things. And on top of that, the amount of money you paid for that house has everything to do with the amount of taxes that you paid on the property too. So if you're paying less taxes on a property when the value of the home is much higher, the less taxes, that means less money is going to the schools, right? But which is when you're looking at gentrification and stuff. But if you're looking at it from a place of, okay, we're getting the value of the home, then it may be a little different. But the part of the issue is, when it comes to redlining, you also have, like I said before, these areas where there's not a lot of Black family home ownership, right? And if you don't have a lot of Black ownership in these communities, there's not a lot of money going into those taxes, which then in turn goes to the schools, which goes to what he was saying, creates a space for a lack of resources. Maybe there's no extracurricular activities, which helps also keep children out of trouble, right? It's a trickle down effect. If you have kids, some boys and playing football, maybe some girls are running track, and all of these things are happening, or maybe somebody's in the school band or something like that. You have these kids participating in these different activities. Guess what? They're staying out of trouble. So if you don't have that, and there's nothing for them to do, people, what is it? There's an old adage. There's an adage that says, "And I don't mind is the devil's playground." So if these kids are not doing anything, let's say they got their work done or they didn't feel like doing it, they're not looking to do something else that's positive and constructive, right? And then that also helps.
Too,
that
Sam.
also,
I'm sorry.
also
I was going to say.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say too. What about, not to mention, just a kid who can get inspired by that first art class or that first music class, right? Like, so that introduces them to a love for something that they can go off and, make a career from. Dance and dramatics, things of that nature. Specialty arts schools, things, School of Special Arts, those type of programs that would be maybe more readily available. I remember back in the day, They used to have, like you said, home ec and you know what I'm saying, wood class. Y'all asking why the men don't know how to do this and that. They took it out to schools. You know what I'm saying? So,
Same thing.
and
Why women
it
don't know
was
how to
even
cook?
drivers ed. I don't know if certain schools even still
Hold
offer
on though.
that,
That
but
goes to
that
why
was
women
another
ain't
thing.
cooking. That goes to why women ain't cooking because they ain't learned.
True, true. So you got that, and why, like you said, why men ain't building? Because you know what I'm saying. Again, you necessarily didn't learn. So, these are definitely things that, and again, we understand that the schools are trying to, as big as the budget that they may receive, it's still not necessarily enough for them to adequately do the things that they need to pay the teachers that they need to maybe have the type of sizes. So this isn't anything predicated to the school and how they're doing what they do with their resources. It's more so just speaking to the system of how the tax dollars and the taxable income that comes from most of the people that own property within a certain region, plays a part into building up that budget,
So let me speak
along
to
with the
that.
state government as well.
Let me speak to that because here in Memphis and Shelby County, like I told Sam the other day, when I went back to law school in 2012, we had two school systems. We had Memphis City Schools and we had Shelby County School Systems. Memphis is in Shelby County. So Memphis City Schools got a portion of, well, Shelby County got the Shelby County tax dollars. Memphis City got Memphis City tax dollars as well as Shelby County tax dollars. They had more tax dollars afforded to them. And however, just knowing the structure of where we are here, Shelby County those school systems were always better prepared and college ready than Memphis City schools. And it was really about allocating funds within the county. So if you had Millington, people pay county taxes, they pay Millington city taxes, but in the county taxes, they paid those county taxes, but what percentage of that went to what school and what schools under which school system? Fast forward to August of 2014. 7 school systems existed from August 2014 to today, because you had those municipalities that didn't want their schools. It was a conversation about blending because taxpayers' monies weren't being distributed equally across the schools. So conversations went on. They were going to blend Shelby County and Memphis City schools. It was going to be one school system. Well, you had municipalities that, for the lack of better words, didn't want their children going to school with little black babies. So they created their own school systems. Arlington Community Schools, Bartlett City Schools, Germantown Municipal District, Lakeland School District, Millington Municipal Schools, Collierville Community Schools, and still leaving that Memphis and Shelby County school system. When those monies are pooled, now nobody wants to go to school with our chocolate babies. Well, the monies are being pooled because all of those people, all of those municipalities are still in Shelby County. So what happens? I pulled my child out of that school system. Oh, but I really can't afford it. Or some of you all are moving to my school system because y'all notice that our books are better because of the resources that we're getting. Well, now I'm taking my baby out of this school system. I'm going to take them out of one of these 7 school systems and I'm going to send them to private school. Well, private school is on your dollar, right? Well, there's a case called McEwen versus Lee. It's called the voucher law here in Tennessee. It was created and it was a case in 2019 case, voucher law, where Governor Lee wanted to take some of taxpayers' money and give it as a voucher for those private school students. Well, now we already not getting no money, and you're going to take the little bit we are getting and spread it out to these private school folks that didn't want to go to school with my baby. That's an issue. And so as recent as July 26, that was overturned, so to speak. And by this, and they're funny with their language. They say it was overturned, but the crux of it all is you have to take. We are now paying, as of July 26, 2022, our taxpayer dollars are going to fund private tuition. So now my money can't even go help my babies go to school. It has to now also fund what you're doing on a private level. And it's only targeted in two major counties here in Tennessee. And oddly enough, what do those counties have in common? They have the largest African-American demographic as far as education is concerned. And so that is a disparity. And that's where we are here in Tennessee. So that's why I say this is a hot topic here. It goes deeper, and now we're getting laws to support it. So what are we going to do now to effectuate a change to minimize the racial inequality that obviously is pouring into our school systems, been in our school systems, honestly, since the Little Rock 9, been pouring into our school systems. What are we gonna do now? Because it ain't just happening here in Tennessee. It ain't just happening here in Memphis and Shelby County. What's the next steps? Because it affects us, and it's a lot of our babies are being forced to take trades, go to trade school and build trades versus being college ready.
Yeah. And so you're right, that doesn't happen. I mean, that does happen in many other places. And that is a good segue into the next portion of the podcast, where we're going to talk about bus-ins, right? So way back when, I think it was like in the 60s, when schools were desegregated legally, right? There were programs all over the country where they took students from one area of town and bused them into another area of town for, number one, a different experience, and number two, in some places, a better education. We went to law school with a white guy who was a bus-in. I also was a bus-in, right? So he and I used to talk about our contrasting experiences. He went from a predominantly white neighborhood to a Black neighborhood as a bus-in. And I found that to be incredibly interesting, right? Because in that case, that's more about experience and learning different culture and things like that. For me, although that was the basis, the main reason why in my community it was busing from the inner city to the suburbs was also for a better education. Case in point, when I was in high school, Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts. And at the time that Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts, Massachusetts had some of the top public schools in the country, and my school was one of them. So I had the benefit of getting a great education, and I was a bus-in from elementary school all the way through high school. I did the whole grade school program there, but I chose to go to an HBCU because despite, the education that I got there, I knew that something was still lacking. But the education I got there helped me see that something was lacking. My family helped me see that there was something lacking because there were people in my family who had gone to PWIs. There was also a big group in my family that went to HBCUs. And so for me, that's what I wanted to do, for me to control my own education and see what I could learn, right? But everybody doesn't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? So the way that these bus-in programs work, well, at least the one that I was in, it was called Metco. It is called Metco because it still exists. I have family members that are in there now. I got family members that go to my high school. And so the way that it works is you got to get on a list because everybody and their mama wants their kid to go into this program because they want their kids to get the best education, right? And so what happens is they get on this list. Once the name gets called, then it can get called in elementary school, it can get called in middle school, and it can get called in high school. But once they get through, they get in the program, and then the way that it's set up, you got to get up super early, get on a school bus, and they bring you to school. So there's a busing system, right? There are sports teams, right? Like I was in track and I was a cheerleader. You know, we have basketball, football, wrestling, tennis, swim, golf, diving, like every kind of sport you can think about. I had at my, you know, hockey, all kinds of stuff for boys and girls, right? And all of that stuff was available to me as, you know, a busing student. There was nothing like, oh, you can't because you live so far away. They didn't have any of that kind of foolishness going on there. But I could look at a school counterpart that's in the city, and they might not even have band. They may not have chorus. They may not have, you know, track or football, or, you know, there's all of these different programs that they may not necessarily have. And, you know, Black children are some of the most talented children on the planet. And I say that without exaggeration or hesitation. Like, they are some of the most talented people on the planet. When you look at sports and music and anything that's related to creativity, you see so many Black people dominating. Why? Because it's just in our DNA, right? And so I think going towards something that E had mentioned earlier, you know, if somebody has never been exposed to that, they don't know that they might be good at it. Or if they know that they're good at it and it's not available to them, you can't foster that talent and help grow it in the way that it needs to be grown. And so the busing programs were incredibly helpful to me. I don't know if other people have had other experiences. I know Kamala Harris was also a busing. Joe Biden was against the program back in the day when it happened. But I love the fact that I had that experience because it gave me a broad spectrum of exposure to, you know, a lot of different things, not just being in a predominantly white school, right? Because there were a lot of Jewish people I went to school with. I learned more about the Jewish faith. I learned about different cultures that are predominantly white, that it may not necessarily be, oh, white culture, but it might be Irish culture or German culture or Spanish from Spain culture or Italian culture. I learned all of these different things. But they got to learn from me too, right? They got to learn from the brown students who also went to school with me. They got to learn about Black culture, about hip hop even as a culture. They got to learn about, you know, different Hispanic, cultures that come from different Hispanic countries, whether it be South America or Central America, or, you know, some of the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, Latin American places like Puerto Rico, or, you know, just different places, even Dominican Republic. We also got to learn about Haitian and Caribbean culture. So it was a great space to be able to learn about all these different cultures, right? Because although we advocate for Black folks, I mean, we also advocate for exposure and growth and learning that we're not the only people on the planet, right? And that we got to be able to, you know, grow and work and move this planet around, right? And we got to be able to do it in a cohesive way. So I just wanted to go ahead and throw that in there.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, since you were throwing that out there about the busing systems and the school districts, and you were kind of comparing the different, you know, predominantly white schools and then the predominantly Black schools. And you can just take a look at like some of these universities, right? I know we're talking about school districts, not on a university level, but more on the, you know, elementary to K through 12 level. Not the university system, but you could just look at the endowments. That's another example. You can see even when it's the higher level of education for the schools, like was it Harvard's endowment is well above like almost all the HBCUs combined, basically. It dwarfs, and that's just one school. Like, let's not even take the other Ivy Leagues or any other predominantly prestigious old institution compared to our HBCUs, our historic Black people's historic institutions. So that's a disparity in itself when it's known that a lot of these institutions, such as Harvard, had its roots in slavery, right? So, you know, it's deeply rooted in our education system, these discriminatory practices, and these institutions definitely need to break bread, for lack of better terms, come off some of that money to give back to possibly some of these institutions into to further education of Black people in this country, because that's been an injustice for the longest time. There's been literally specific rules. Hey, you can't read. Hey, you can't do this. Like you can go to church, but what are you doing knowing how to read the Bible? So it's just a bunch of rules that was specifically made for Black people to keep them behind, and it hasn't been rectified yet. So, especially in the educational sector. So I just wanted to say that real quick.
No, I agree with that. And I think that was one of the things that they looked at as far as like changing up the endowments for some of the schools at one point in time that they were looking at, because of schools having certain histories within racism as well. Another thing that, like we all mentioned earlier too, is the Bank of America solution that they have as well that's coming out here. So, I mean, I think it's definitely, we're seeing a different trend as far as movement going towards it, but it's definitely been like, challenging to see what can go on.
Yeah, but just to finish up what you were saying, with the Bank of America situation, I think Bank of America is trying to do something good, but obviously they can do better, right? When you're discriminating against people as far as mortgage loans, I don't know if Bank of America has been caught into something, but definitely Wells Fargo and other companies. So there's definitely more there that you can do to aid them. Especially, we all already know about the appraisal values, as Shante and Sam mentioned earlier. So that's another thing. But I did want us to kind of touch on the legal schooling, right? So that's another injustice, right? So a lot of Black parents who are together, it's a stable home, they want to send their kids to a better location to where the resources are getting funded. So sometimes they use different addresses and stuff like that. So so if we build up our communities, or if there's some resources from the government, these boards and stuff approve more resources for the communities. That way, people don't have to do those illegal schooling, for lack of better words. So I don't know if y'all guys have any more insight on that topic, but I just wanted
to.
No, definitely. I want.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'll let you go first.
You got it, Sam. You got it, Sam.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say was that, I know a number of people that have done it, right? And so the thing of it is that the reason why is because they want their kids to have a better education. And so what they do is, they might change addresses. They might use somebody else's address. Maybe it's a family member, a friend, something like that, so that their kid can go to school in a district where it's getting more funding and resources. They know that the school is not a piece of crap and that their kids are getting some good education. There's teachers there that care about the growth and the benefit of the student and their children, things like that. However, when people find out, right? As a matter of fact, I went to high school with a kid whose mom used to work in the town that we went to school at, but he lived near where we were, the rest of us, right? So he was from the city. His mom worked out there in the town, and he wasn't in the program. So the issue was that. So what she did was she used the address of her employer so that her son could go to school in that district. And then, and so he was able to go, right? And the school found out and they tried to put him out of the school. I can't remember if he got kicked out. I think he might have. I don't really remember, but because it was a long time ago. But I do know that they found out and there was some issues, right? But the thing that gets me is when parents are going to jail behind it. Right. Kamala Harris was in California doing what she was doing as a prosecutor and prosecuted a woman for illegally sending her child to school. So, you do see parents getting prosecuted for that kind of stuff, which is crazy because they just want the best for their kids. And if, it was equal, if the kind of resources that these students in schools and stuff were getting were quote unquote equal, then parents wouldn't feel the need to have to do that kind of stuff, to have to take those kinds of measures in order to ensure that their children are getting a good education. So that was what I wanted to say. Everett, did you want to go ahead and add anything?
Yeah, I did. My little conclusion on this whole topic was, I think, like you said, school of choice is definitely a good opportunity for people to try to combat that. The only issue is sometimes, which again, it just might mean, and whatever, when there's a will, there's a way. Kids might have to get up a little bit early if there is public transportation that maybe can provide. We also know certain neighborhoods don't have public transportation in certain, certain areas. So having a parent that has the resources to be able to take a kid to a place is one thing, but at least being able to have that school of choice is something that does help. So I think that's one little thing, what I'm saying, that I want to put on there. And I think to penalize the parent who's just trying to, use the address to say that they're gonna put their kid in a certain school is OD to me, because everyone's here to try to live the American dream, and having a good education is part of that.
Absolutely. Shantae, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything else before we go ahead and give our closing remarks.
You hit the nail on the head, Sam. I was just going to add, if there was anything to add, desperate times calls for desperate measures. We're looking at taxpayer dollars and where those dollars, what resources they afford. And if I have the opportunity to afford my child the best education possible to ensure my child's success in the future, I can understand why people do what they do to get the best education, or what could be classified as the best education. I think criminal prosecution is a bit, it's a bit OD, but at the same time, it is fraud. So I get it, but I don't get it to the levels of how they've been prosecuted and getting it passed. But no, I get it. At the end of the day, desperate time calls for desperate measures, and parents, a lot of them, and when you are not well versed in the law, when you are not well versed in rules, you do what you got to do to get your child what your child needs.
Exactly, so that they don't have to go through those same type of measures that you went through. The criminal justice system is big money business. So, the fact that people are being prosecuted has everything to do with the dollar and less to do with the crime, especially in that instance. I mean, don't get me wrong, in many circumstances, it has everything to do with the crime itself and controlling the population and things of that nature. But in that instance, that's just about money, because you don't want, you're penalizing parents for trying to get their children to learn. Just like when they first desegregated the schools, and how white people would line the streets and just, scream these racial epithets at Black folks just trying to take their kids to school to learn. That's it. That's all they wanted to do was learn. There's nothing wrong with learning. And so with that, I don't know if anybody else wants to give a closing remark before I go ahead and jump into our Black Business of the Month and stuff. Did anybody else have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that did anybody mention the Kamala Harris prosecuting?
I did.
Okay. I was gonna. Okay. All right. Thanks. That's all I was gonna add on to that. I was just gonna say that it's kind of crazy that she's threatening to prosecute the parents for the children missing in school, but I feel like, we're not getting down to the root of the issue, which is the lack of resources in the community, the poverty levels, the true issues aren't being addressed. We're just looking at the surface level issue of like, okay, the kids are missing school. Here's the parents' address where they live. Okay, parents make them go to school, but they're not looking at maybe what's going on in the community, especially in California where the homelessness is sky high. So we need to take a look at some of these other issues that are underneath the surface level ones. That's all.
Hey, actually, I did have one more thing. I think one of the things that schools do to try to impact it also is by count day. They also try to have, different little things available, school bikes, you know what I mean, TVs, whatever for students. And I think that also helps. But again, that's just one way schools are trying to come back at, to try to continue to compete for dollars that might be state funded.
Right. Jonte, did you have anything that you wanted to add as far as the potential solution or anything?
It's going to have to be a shift in on Capitol Hill. We got to take politics out of raising how we raise our children and how we afford resources to our babies. And that's actually a catch-22 because it's all truly tied up, like voting and how it relates to voting on taxes and the people we put into place. Like not just the, we think of voting as the people we put in, but a lot of those amendments and those addendums that are on that's on the ballot, it's time for us to start for real reading them and then understanding them and looking into them before we go to the box to vote. And educating the community on what these things mean, because they are truly shaping what we do and how we move and how our babies are educated and the resources that are afforded to them while we try to pour into their education.
Yeah. Some of the solutions that I have are, legislation, right? When you're talking about legislation, create it so that the money just goes into a pot and all the schools get the same amount of money. Stop doing it so that, it depends on the home ownership in that particular area. No, all the children need to learn. You know what I'm saying? And so I think just creating an equal type of educational system, regardless of whether or not it forces children to be segregated or not, right? It's more so about the quality of education that the kids get. And I think that all children should receive the same type of quality of education. Extracurricular activities need to be available in abundance to all children, right? Because you want to not only foster whatever talents that they have, but you also want to keep them off the streets and away from, getting to know a bunch of dumb stuff. Because a lot of times when kids get involved in crime, most of the time, not most of, but a lot of the time, I'm going to say, I don't know if it's most, but I know a lot of the time it's because they don't have anything better to do, right? They don't have anybody, maybe somebody's not there to really pour into them and tell them, hey, don't do this, do that, because mom is at work and dad is not around, or maybe dad is around, but they're both at work. You know what I mean? And so you just have to be able to find ways to foster those children and create mentoring programs that are required for schools, right? Because children need
guidance. I'm sorry, guys. I just want to simply say I got to drop real fast, but I just wanted to tell everybody goodbye. I appreciate this one on the show. All right.
Okay. Take care. We'll see you later. And e-socials will be posted at the end. But to finish the thought that I had, I wanted to go ahead and that. I don't know if you guys can hear me or if I'm frozen.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You guys, okay, I didn't know if I got frozen because my screen was yeah, but the thing that I wanted to say was, we want to be able to foster the children's talents, keep them off the street, and show them that there are other ways. The reason why I was saying mentoring programs are a mandatory mentoring program is because it helps give kids guidance. All guidance counselors are not always great. I had a guidance counselor tell me I wasn't enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't capable enough. Look at me now. You know what I'm saying? I'm out here a whole lawyer, right? And he was out there telling me that I wasn't smart enough, right? So, and that I wasn't good enough to do the things that I wanted to do. And I did everything I did because it was what I wanted, not because I was going to show him, but still, you know what I'm saying? So I think that when people don't have somebody feeding into them the way that they needed to, like I had, when people are out there, you have adults out there telling children that they're not going to amount to anything, or they need to set their standards real low because they're Black children, right? Then you know, you need somebody that's going to be there to encourage them. And our children need encouragement. So, you know, with that being said, that's my solution, my final thought. I think that we need to get rid of the redlining. I think it's a discriminatory practice. And honestly, redlining in and of itself needs to be illegal, period. It doesn't matter if we're talking about voting. It doesn't matter if we're talking about how it affects a school district or anything else. It just needs to be illegal because it's incredibly discriminatory. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our motivational minute. Well, actually, no, I'll get into the Black Book of the Month. I'm sorry, the Book of the Month first. The Book of the Month that we have for this month is The Miseducation of the Negro. And it is written by Carter Godwin Woodson. It talks about, you know, the way we are taught and some of the things that we're taught that are not necessarily right or accurate. It goes really, really way deeper than what I just said. It's at a high level. The reason why I'm not telling you too much detail is I want y'all to get out and go read it, right? So make sure y'all check it out. It is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter Godwin Woodson. And then the Black Business of the Month, drum roll, it is Black Wall Street, the Black Wall Street Market. That is located out here in Atlanta. It's in Stonecrest. I remember when they were talking about building it. It is a great place for Black entrepreneurs to sell products, things like that. And it is Black owned, right? And so it's called the Black Wall Street Market. Make sure y'all go check it out whenever you're in the Atlanta area. And if you're in the Atlanta area, go check it out. So though that's the Black Business of the Month, the Black Book of the Month. And then that leaves us with the Motivational Minute. I actually have two quotes today. The first quote that I have is by Nelson Mandela. And the quote that I got from him it's about education. It says that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And so understanding that education being the most powerful weapon that a person can use to change the world, and there are people that are trying to mitigate or the education of Black children and Black people, should tell you just how important it is. It's one of the reasons why they didn't want Black people knowing how to read and write when they were enslaved. And so once we've learned, look at how we've thrived, right? And we continue to thrive. And even though, despite all of the oppression, the oppression and the discriminatory tactics that have taken place throughout history, here we are still thriving and flourishing and doing the things that we have to do. Because not only are we survivors, but we're also resilient and we're incredibly, incredibly intelligent. So I just wanted to make sure I breathed that breath of life into you guys. Also, too, the other quote that I had was actually about Malcolm X. And he said, education is the passport to the future for tomorrow. Education is the passport to the future, but tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. And so the reason why I chose that quote is because we have to be able to know where we're going. And we can't know where we're going unless we have education. And it ties well into what Nelson Mandela said as using education as a weapon, right? Because in order to prepare for the future, get prepared for the future, so that we have that weapon of our mind, we gotta be properly educated. And so I just wanted to go ahead and use those I picked those two quotes so that people recognize that we are smart, we are brilliant, we are beautiful people. And that we need to just go ahead and make sure we continue to educate ourselves, because the way it stands right now, we're not getting the proper education in schools. We've also done a podcast about how, the CRT, they're trying to keep Black education about Black people, and it's stemming from slavery, Jim Crow, and even the advancement. They already weren't talking about Black inventors and all of the great accomplishments of most Black people. The only people you ever hear about is Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and every now and then Malcolm X, when there's so many more people have done so many great things, and I think that it's definitely important to recognize that. So keep yourself educated, keep yourself encouraged, and get out and vote. I know a lot of times Black people don't think that voting matters, but it absolutely matters. Hence, how we've been having this discussion. So with that being said, we love y'all. Y'all be good to one another. Thank y'all for tuning in. Our socials are going to be posted up at the end. Shout out to Everett. He had to leave early. Yeah, and make sure you tap in with us on Wednesday at 8:30 for our What's Up Wednesday segment on Instagram. And last but certainly not least, we want to welcome Shantae to our podcast crew. And so you'll see her a lot more regularly. And with that, unless Shantae and Malik have anything to say, we bid you adieu.
No, that's it. You pretty much said it. Check us out this coming Wednesday, 8:30-ish. Our Instagram channel, our handle is at Counterpoints Podcast, and some of our socials will be on the end credit screen.
Yep. So with that, take care. We'll see y'all Wednesday.
All right, guys. Peace.